Alyssa Thorner, and I work in the Johns Hopkins Breast Cancer Program. As many of you know, we do a lot of these webinars about monthly now to try to bring you a variety of different resources and techniques in the community. Today we have a really special guest. We have Amy Genevieve Kozak. She's going to be talking to us a little bit about yoga therapy. Amy is a yoga teacher and internationally certified yoga therapist. She trained with the Duke Integrative Medicine Center and is board certified integrative health coach. Brings a whole breadth of experience. Is going to talk to us a little bit about yoga and how this may be different. Yoga therapy may be a little bit different than yoga. So, Amy, I'm going to turn it over to you, and then hopefully we'll have a few minutes at the end for questions, if that's okay, and I'll come back on. Just real quick, one quick housekeeping thing before I forget. If you do have a question anytime during Amy's presentation, right here at the bottom of your screen, you'll see this chat feature. If you go ahead and type a message into there, we'll get to as many questions as we can at the end of the presentation. But with that, I'd like to turn it over to Amy.
So, hello, everyone. Good evening.
Good evening.
I am going to stop sharing my screen for just a moment. So hopefully you all can see me. I wanted to just check in. It looks like we have a relatively small group. Do folks already know each other?
No, this group does not know each other.
Okay. I wanted to make sure we didn't just skip over a great opportunity for folks to be able to check in with each other. Sometimes when I get invited places, I'm coming into a group that already knows each other. So thank you for clarifying that. And as more people join us, maybe the group will grow bigger. But I totally respect the folks who don't want to have their camera on. As long as a couple people do, I know that I haven't lost everyone. So that's great. Thank you for being willing to show your beautiful faces. All right, that's not the official start to what I have to share tonight. Thank you for the introduction. I've been really excited since I got this email, this invitation to join y'all this evening. So when was that, Elisa? That was a couple of months ago.
It was a couple months ago, yeah.
So I have been preparing for this evening, and fingers crossed things go off without a hitch. So without further ado, I'm gonna go ahead and start sharing my screen again. We won't stay that way. You'll see me again very soon. All right, let me figure out how to do that again. Here we go. All right. We already went over that boring part. I'm happy to offer some clarification if folks are interested in continuing with a yoga practice or continuing to work with a yoga therapist, how you might find somebody so that it doesn't feel so daunting. But these are just some of the little symbols that are affiliated with the certification process for both yoga teachers, yoga therapists, and health coaching, but we're not really here for that piece. So what is yoga therapy? So this little tiny text here is coming from the International Association of Yoga Therapists. Yoga therapy is the process of empowering individuals to progress toward improved health and well-being through the application of the teachings and practices of yoga. Right, that's a mouthful. And someone that I trained with, this beautiful gentleman, Joseph LePage, put it this way: yoga therapy focuses on the path of yoga as a healing journey that brings balance to the body and mind through an experiential understanding of the primary intention of yoga, awakening of spirit, our essential nature. So there's a lot there as well, but you can already tell there's a little shift, a different perspective. Larry Payne, who I do not know, but I really appreciated the simplicity of his statement. Yoga therapy adapts the practice of yoga to the needs of people with specific or persistent health problems not usually addressed in a group class. So I loved that. Hopefully that provides a bit more of clarification and the different approaches, different viewpoints that folks have on this term yoga therapy. So before we start our time together, because it will be experiential, I wanted to bring up this idea of short and long-term intention setting. So for our time today, I wanted to take a moment to honor our individual and our collective past, present, and future. So what do I mean by that? So to the left here, you see my beautiful grandmother, Grandmother Brown. She was a breast cancer survivor, and I just adore this picture and the ability to offer that image and honor her in this presentation. So thank you for that opportunity. So maybe for you as an individual, you'd like to think about your past, your present, and your future as well. So in the bottom right-hand corner, I always have to ground myself in where I am. I live on land that is Piscataway, the tribal nation of Piscataway. And this is a picture of when they were recognized by the state of Maryland, which was rather recent. They're still not recognized federally. So I find for myself, it's a really nice grounding practice to honor ancestors, people of the land. So I invite you to do that as well. And then during our short time together, I wanted to offer an intention. Maybe you have an idea of what you'd like to set for your own intention. Maybe you're gathering some tools, trying to understand the difference between yoga and yoga therapy. But as we move into the more experiential portion of what I am offering this evening, I invite you to cultivate a witness within yourself of what is happening with your experience. And hopefully you can be as kind and gentle with yourself and about your experience. That's maybe a tall request, but it does stem from my lineage. It's a Kripalu way of thinking. And Kripalu was a person, not just a place. And I think he said it a bit more aptly, self-observation without judgment. So cultivating a witness in that regard. And then also, hopefully you'll hear me remember to remind you to breathe. When I was preparing for this presentation, I watched a lot of videos out there, and there are some breathing practices, but I like to encourage this reminder that we're not just breathing while we're practicing or while I'm reminding you to practice, but hopefully we're remembering to breathe and utilize these techniques also out in the world. So my intention to constantly remind you to breathe is that idea of practicing on your mat or in your chair, wherever you might be, even in your bed, but also remembering to breathe out in the world, utilize these tools fully. And then maybe over the long term with a yoga practice or with a yoga therapy practice or utilizing some of the tools, perhaps you may experience what the literature is suggesting you might experience over time: reduced fatigue and stress, as well as improved sleep, physical functioning, quality of life. And because I'm sharing my screen, I don't know if there are questions coming in, so I'm not trying to be rude. So what is yoga, right? Yoga therapy uses the tools of yoga, right? Yoga is a practice and a philosophy, and you'll see here listed what very commonly gets put out into the world is what is yoga, being the poses, the asanas. But there are also these underlying philosophies, these restraints and observances, the breath that I already mentioned, this idea of withdrawing the senses, so not just cultivating a witness, but noticing how you're using your senses to navigate through the world, focus, sometimes the inner focus, like the withdrawal of the senses, meditation, and bliss. Integration is how I like to think of the ultimate state of yoga. We could probably have conversations for hours about all of these different aspects of yoga, but we don't have time for that tonight. And here's Swami Kripalu, who I mentioned. I wanted to really focus on the breath, as I mentioned, and he once said, whoever relies on the breath has obtained a key to yoga and has taken a good path. So hopefully you all will agree by the time our time together is over this evening. So I wanted to start with diaphragmatic breathing, and I love this image. I probably should say I don't have the rights to use it. And I do apologize in advance if that creates any sort of problems. But I'm going to stop sharing my screen. If I can figure out where my cursor is. Okay. So that I can help folks explore diaphragmatic breath. But I also don't want to assume that folks don't know what diaphragmatic breathing is. Anybody brave to raise their hand? Okay, won't belabor that. So if you would like to, if it's comfortable, if you're seated, maybe you're not, if you're sitting comfortably, or you could get more comfortable, please do so. Could place both of your hands on your belly. I'm going to adjust my screen so you can see a little bit more. Right, and so this diaphragmatic breath that you saw in that picture is to focus underneath the lungs, underneath the rib cage, and try to inflate as you inhale this region, your belly. And then as you exhale, and it can be through your nose or through your mouth if you need to, then that balloon deflates. If it's not comfortable to hold your hands that way, or if it's not advised right now to hold your hands that way, maybe at night you place a pillow on your belly and breathe that way. All right, just watch the rise and the fall, or feel the rise and the fall of the pillow as you breathe. For folks that don't have an issue with lying on their front, right, another great way to feel that, if you don't have those restrictions, is the press of the belly into the floor, if that's comfortable, or into the bed, if that is more preferable, right? That inflating of the belly and exhaling that deflation of the belly, which is really the diaphragm underneath the lungs. So if you're not already breathing, and ideally breathing in and out through the nose, right, is cleaning the air a little bit. The hairs in the nose are helping with that. But if that's not comfortable, go ahead and breathe through the mouth. Maybe you'll work up to that. And I do meet people that don't find this easy. So I didn't want to assume that just telling people to breathe was a clear instruction. And if everyone here is a professional breather, I do apologize for belaboring this point. I'm seeing one head shake, no. Okay. All right, so maybe I should be quiet and allow some more time for diaphragmatic breathing. Right, it doesn't have to happen tonight, right? But there is a progression with this breath to start to create a wave up through the body. So filling the lungs completely and taking the focus from the diaphragm all the way up, right? If it's comfortable, if it's safe, if it's advised for you to have movement through the chest, this breath, this diaphragmatic breath, can become a 3-part breath. So what does that mean? It means belly, underneath the rib cage, the lungs filling completely all on one inhale, and air filling the upper regions through the chest, and maybe even a little bit up into the throat. So you're not holding the breath with this technique. The wave would come back out of the body as you exhale. The air would leave through this upper region, through the nose or through the mouth, whatever is feeling most comfortable, through the rib cage, and lastly the belly. And again, I'm not trying to make this more difficult. If you would rather just focus on finding the diaphragmatic breath without making the wave, you certainly don't have to. I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate it. Evidence that if folks are facing treatment, the ability to stay focused on the breath could make it a more potentially, I wouldn't say pleasant, but less not pleasant experience might be a good way to think about it. And then just people aren't fully breathing in general. So regardless of treatment, if you're post-treatment or pre-treatment, just practicing the breath and helping to regulating not just the breath and the body, but the emotion, the mind and the body are connected. This practice is a beautiful way of feeling that. So hopefully folks have had an opportunity to explore. And again, if it was difficult, it's just a practice. If you want to build into a 3-part breath at some point, just a practice. And again, if I had some professional breathers, I'm all ears if folks want to tell me what was going on, or maybe give a thumbs up or any sort of reaction button if you're not wanting to turn your screen on. And if you don't want to, that's fine too. All right, so I don't know that I need to share the screen, but I will do so briefly for the next slide, for the next breathing technique, if we don't have any questions at this point. Okay. My apologies. All right, so lion's breath. This image here is of my niece and myself, and she's making a funny face. And lion's breath is something that could bring a great bit of joy into your life with young people. It's almost like a face mudra. I'll get more into what a mudra is. And so I just wanted to share this picture, and then I will stop sharing my screen to come chat with you about what lion's breath is. All right, so lion's breath. I mentioned a face mudra. Mudras are intentional holding, traditionally, maybe more often of hands. Anjali mudra is the most common, but I mentioned a face mudra. So this breathing technique is a bit of a dramatic, almost a face mudra, right? So I'll go ahead and do it. And if you feel you want to laugh at me, that's fine too, because it's a pretty humorous thing to watch somebody do. We don't typically do this in public, do we? All right. So if you wanted to join me, we can do that for a few more moments, and I'm happy to tell you why I would suggest such a thing as well. Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much, Carmen, for being willing to show your face and to be doing lion's breath. I really appreciate that so much. Hopefully folks are getting a little humor here with us. Yeah, so a few more moments with that. Maybe you're finding the power of the breath from the diaphragm even. Maybe it's comfortable to take the eyes up to this area between the eyebrows. Maybe it isn't. So you can do as much or as little of this as feels comfortable for you. So sometimes we don't have an outlet for maybe some of the more difficult emotions, right? And so to get some aggression out, I had a friend admit to me that they already did this before they even knew that this was a yoga practice, a yoga tool. So when you need to hang up the phone, you've got this breathing technique, but also it's just funny, and maybe your face feels like it's gotten a nice refreshing exercise. And there are, the way I was just demonstrating, there are ways to really accentuate it and exaggerate it and arch the whole spine. But if you've got any restrictions through the front of the body, I didn't want to take us there tonight. But maybe, holding tension in your neck, through your face, and that's one way to also relieve it, in addition to using this power of the diaphragm to breathe out. Any thoughts or questions about lion's breath before I move on? I'm sure there's something I'm forgetting, and questions always are really helpful to jog my memory. Okay, I will share the screen.
Amy, would there ever be a reason why lion's breath would be contraindicated?
So I did not find any evidence for that one, but I think that if you have some eye issues, that would be a good one. Yeah, so thank you for asking. And thank you for asking this, because this is an important distinction. So if you go to a yoga class, you will sign a release. If you go to a yoga therapist or a yoga therapy group class, you won't just be signing a release, you'll be having a full assessment, a full conversation. And so then I will be able to do my due diligence for each person in that group or each client that I'm working with to make sure that we're having a full discussion before I'm suggesting things that could be contraindicated, right? And thank you again for asking too, because you know best, right? What is in the literature, what I say is a contraindication. You could have an adverse experience despite all of that. And so if it does not feel right for you, please skip it. I think I said that. I hope I said that, right? If it's just too weird, you know, that's valid. So thank you for asking that.
Yeah, that's helpful.
Okay, so let's move on to that. Next slide. I am sorry that this part is taking so terribly long. See if I can figure out how to do it a little quicker. All right, bee buzzing breath. All of these are called pranayama. They're all breathing techniques. They're all tools of yoga. I love this image because there's a fun story, but I'll save that fun story towards the end if that's okay. And so I will stop sharing again so that I can teach, so you can see me. And because the question has come up, if you've got sinus issues or headaches, this might not be the day for you, but it also might be the sort of thing that you can discern for yourself. It actually might help some of those things. Might help with eye tension, might help with jaw issues. So what we're going to be doing is a breath that's a nice internal massage. And the way that the breath is done traditionally, I'll show you first. I don't enjoy it the way that it's traditionally done, and many of my clients prefer modification. So I'll give you options. We're going to be using mudras along the face. So we're also going against CDC guidelines right now. If you haven't washed your hands, right, for serious, not touching the face is a great thing to say, no, I'm not wanting to utilize this at this juncture, right? We are living through a pandemic, to just name where we are. All right, so enough about that. So Brahmari, the bee buzzing breath, like I said, is going to be an internal hum. And you can try to utilize the diaphragmatic portion of your breath, but you don't necessarily have to. It could just be an inhale and your exhale becomes a hum. So before I place my hands, I'll go ahead and allow for that. I'll demonstrate it. Don't have to force it to be any special length, right? Just whatever feels natural and comfortable. If it feels comfortable, skip it if it doesn't. And then I'll add the traditional alignment of the hands. So the first finger right here at the corner of the eyes, so you'll probably want to close your eyes. Next finger right at the bottom of the nose, corner of the nose. Last two fingers over the mouth. Thumbs could be in the ears. And as I mentioned, there's also a modification. If that's not appealing to you, you could place your fingers up over your eyebrows and your thumbs lightly, gently underneath the jaw. Okay, so you could do the whole series with the fingers over the eyebrows, fingers lightly underneath the eyes on the cheekbones, on the tops of the teeth, or if you find a favorite, you could stick to that. But I do want to pause and just make sure there aren't any questions. If you're happily buzzing like a bee, we'll continue for a few moments longer. So join me for another round or two or three if you'd like, in any way that appeals to you. So whenever you're done, you could take a moment to just pause and notice. Don't have to rush to get there if you're still finishing up your bee buzzing breath. I think perhaps, Carmen, thank you again. You were finishing up. Thumbs up if that one was maybe a little easier than finding the diaphragm. Yeah. So you've got options. All right, so let me go back to sharing my screen if there aren't any questions at this point, any comments at this point. Folks are saving them to the end, I hope.
One quick comment, that seemed to relax my shoulders, which I find always are up here. Lots of tension up and through here, and immobility in particular my right shoulder. So it just, the humming, there's something that draws everything down. And I guess one question is, breathing in, we leave our fingers where they are, correct? Because then I lose focus on using my abdominal diaphragm and to breathe in. But the breathing out seems to go on forever, humming, or internal.
Beautiful. Yeah, there's no wrong way to do it. And if you are finding that it's too distracting and don't want to focus so much on the diaphragmatic portion of the breath, there is benefit from the hum. So like you said, if it's distracting and you would rather focus on the breathing and the humming and the placement of the hands, that is absolutely A-okay. Yeah. Yeah. And I love it. Thank you for sharing the benefit, unintended benefit. Beautiful.
Amy, we're getting a question from someone that asks, do the fingertips rest or pressed lightly?
So you want to be really careful underneath the eyes, but especially if you were using the traditional, the first one, there are very specific points that you're pressing on. So you may want to just play with the idea of what's appropriate for you, right? And similarly, if you want to use the modified version, right, absolutely up to you. You could play with the exact placement and feel if there's a preference. So there's no hard and fast rule that I know about with the exact right pressure, but it's a great question.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. Thank you for fielding the questions in the chat.
We're getting another question in the chat, if you don't mind. How many times is the breathing? 3 to 5 times in a row is the question.
I personally enjoy doing about 6 rounds of the breath. I'm shifting my hands down along the face, but I don't think that you can breathe too much, right? If you're enjoying it and it's relieving any issues in the neck or putting you in a better place to go to sleep, I don't think you can do too much. But that's a great question. Maybe we need more research on what's too much. That'd be a good problem to have. Too much breathing and I fell asleep, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you.
All right. So don't want to jump the gun if there are no more questions. I'm going to try to, okay. Let's see. I thought I was going to get faster. I don't think I remembered to hit share screen. There we go. There it is. All right, so I did want to give a little outline and bring some motion into the practice. So you can continue breathing in any way, right? If you find it too distracting, as was mentioned, to focus on the diaphragmatic breath, you can breathe in and out through the nose, maybe just exaggerate the exhale a bit. But if that's not happening easily for you either, of course, breathe any way that is comfortable. I think comfortable is the key here, right? So we're gonna go through as much of this as we've got time for. So if we start running out of time, I do apologize. The joint freeing series, tense and release, a little self-massage, and then we'll just allow ourselves to rest, and I'll do a short guided meditation, and then I'll come back to the slides. So I will stop sharing my screen and go ahead and go through these. So what I'm going to offer could feel very different if you're not seated, but you can do some of this lying down. And if you're feeling extra energetic, there are ways to move the body so that you're doing a joint freeing series standing. So I'll stay seated for the time being, but just know that you always have options in yoga therapy. All right, so if it feels comfortable for you to lower your chin and gently draw a line across the floor, an imaginary line, of course. And notice if you already forgot to breathe, right? You could widen that little line into maybe a bit more of a moon shape by lifting the chin to either side. You don't have to move at the same pace that I am. You can move at your own pace. And if this isn't comfortable or isn't safe for your neck, by all means skip it. We won't be here for a long time. And if you were moving, maybe bring your chin back through center when you're ready and simply lift your chin. And I saw, and hopefully folks are very, very sound with their restrictions through their body, right? So if I offer something that doesn't work for you, please skip it. But hopefully it feels all right for you to lift your hands. We'll get to the restrictions in a moment. And you can watch what you're doing, or you could close your eyes. Just wiggle the fingers, roll the hands around, moving into the wrists as well. And again, I'll remind you, have you stopped breathing? And sometimes we stop breathing because we're watching or trying to figure out what the heck we're doing. When your fingers feel enlivened and your wrists feel nice from that movement, hopefully you would skip it if those words don't apply, that nice word especially. You could choose, if it's right for you, to extend your arms slightly, just a little bit, and curl the fingers back towards the wrist, back towards the shoulders. Bring the elbows in a little bit. Watching what you're doing or closing your eyes. Maybe you've got a preference, a pattern of breath already going on, so you don't have to change it. Maybe you want to inhale and extend the hand and finger. And exhale, pull them back. Or maybe it's the opposite, and I messed you up. And then whenever you're ready, you could just allow your hands to land in your lap or alongside the body, however you originally came to a seat. Here's the restriction part, right? So if it's appropriate for you, if it feels nice for you to bring your shoulders up, and you could gently lower them maybe on an exhale. And you could do that a few times. Lifting the shoulders, dropping the shoulders gently. Right, and so if it's right for you to roll the shoulders, it's not going to be right for everybody. You know best, and your doctor has maybe given you some suggestions. Right, you don't have to be in unison here. If it's right for you, you could kind of pedal the shoulders back. In our culture, I do assume that most folks need to take the shoulders back, all this texting, all this driving, all of this business. But if you would rather roll your shoulders forward, if you were rolling your shoulders in unison or not, you could do that instead. And then if you were moving your shoulders at all, you could bring them to stillness when you are ready to do so. I don't have to rush you. And I will move back just simply so that you can see my feet. We'll move to the lower extremities. All right, and if you've got the ability to put your foot out in front of you in some way, it could be resting on the floor. Like I said, I just have it lifted slightly so that you can see what I'm doing. And you could do this in bed as well. It'll feel a little different. You could lift the toes if you were doing this standing. You could wiggle the toes, much like what we were doing with the hands, but with the feet. Wiggle the toes and roll one foot around, feeling into the ankle. Maybe you'd like to do both feet. Hopefully you can see enough of my feet. I forgot to tilt the screen down, I think. Excuse me a moment. All right, so the joint frame series includes the feet. We're warming up the synovial fluid all through the body. And I saw quite a bit of information. I don't know how folks are doing with some lymphedema issues. All right, so if it's appropriate, and it's not going to be appropriate for everybody, you do want your knees to stay in alignment with your toes. When you're ready, if you'd like to, you can move up into the hips and create a windshield wiper motion with one foot. If one hip is a little cranky or doesn't want to do this at all, With the other foot, waking up the hip joint. Right, maybe you've got that different kind of car with the windshield wipers that go the other way. And whenever you're ready to be done with that, you could come to stillness. And I'll move forward again. So the joint frame series, I don't know if anybody feels just a little looser. Maybe it's the end of the day. Maybe it's something that might make more sense to do first thing in the morning. Totally up to you how you end up utilizing any of these tools, if you end up utilizing any of these tools at all. So that's the joint frame series. Wanted to give the option of doing tense and release. And so this isn't necessarily going to be something that people want to do either, but much like with the joint frame series, we'll just move through the body, right? I have a preference, doesn't have to be your preference, of moving up from the ground. I mentioned grounding at the start of my presentation. So you could, especially if you're seated, feel your feet and kind of make fists with your feet, even if they're inside shoes, and you could let go of your feet. Maybe on an exhale. And you could do that a few times. And you could move up through both legs or work with one leg, tensing one side of the body, one leg, and the other. Exhaling to release. Maybe do one leg at a time and both legs together. And whenever you're ready for that to be done, you could move up through the body if it's right for you, right? And this is a part of finding the diaphragm. Some people really have a lot of constriction here. You could try to grip, right? Pull the belly in and release on an exhale. You could do that a couple of times. And if that's not right for you, right? If you're preferring watching the belly lift and lower with a pillow, for example, you don't have to tense and release through the belly. And if there are restrictions, definitely don't want to do that in the chest, right? But maybe you lift all the way up through the body, through the feet, through the legs, through the abdomen, through the shoulders, and you could even bring in the hands. And you could be more slowly than this and build up through the body, but tensing and releasing. Maybe this is giving you information of, oh, I didn't realize I was holding my hand like that all day, or I didn't realize that my foot felt that way, right? It's just an opportunity to really scan through the body and not just focus on the affected side. If folks have an affected side, I heard a lot of that verbiage in some of the videos that I was watching, right? Again, treat you like a whole body, a whole system, honoring restrictions, absolutely. But tensing and releasing, and we did a little bit of that with the lion's breath too, if you wanted to build all the way up through the body and include the face. And if you felt a little frustrated today, maybe let out a noisy exhale or a lion's breath. So these tools can start to build on each other if you want them to. And then if and when you're ready, if you're tensing or releasing, you don't have to rush to be done. Just pause and notice. Take a few moments to breathe. And then when you're ready, if you'd like to join me for a little self-massage, you could. All right, so we had mudras through the face, placement of the hands along the face. So again, respecting if folks don't want to touch your face, you don't have to. And you can do this with your eyes closed if you're willing and able and want to. You could bring the fingers to the temple and gently massage there. Once in a while, I do encounter folks that don't like this. So instead of maybe quarter-like shapes, I've got a couple of clients that prefer drawing a line across their temple. But just a reminder to breathe while you're doing this, because there's a lot of figuring out, what is Amy saying? What am I doing? Eyes can be closed or open, absolutely up to you. And then you could bring the fingers towards the corners of the nose and swipe towards the corners of the mouth. I like this image of as if you're drawing whiskers with face paint on your own face. So a few different lines. Breathing as you do so. And then if you'd like to, you could bring the fingers back behind the ears and do a gentle little massage behind your ears. And if it's right, you don't have to rush if you're enjoying any part of this. You could choose when you're ready, if you'd like to bring the fingers down along the side of your neck. Maybe press a little more firmly Since folks did ask that question, maybe you don't want to press that firmly. Maybe you want to make a little trip towards the back of your neck. And if you lowered your chin earlier, for some people maybe that wasn't right, you could pause and press into the base of your skull. Don't forget to breathe. And when you're ready to drag the fingers down on the back of your neck, you could. And if you've got some restrictions, right, maybe even this amount of lifting isn't right for some people, please honor your body. Please honor your instructions from your medical folks. Maybe you found the place where the neck and the shoulders meet. You could keep your chin lowered or lifted. Maybe this is very cat-like. Hopefully you like cats. And your hands could rest on your heart or in your lap. And you could just notice if anything had shifted, if you were doing any of those techniques for yourself. And of course, breathe while you check in. All right, so if you're in a restful place, or if you'd like to get a little more restful, I have so many clients that love to be on their yoga mat. I will demonstrate this. You don't have to do it, but just so that you know. All right, so many people enjoy just simply placing their yoga mat. Could be a towel, right? Want to avoid breathing carpet fibers, maybe. To have a little rest and integration on their backs. And if you're in your bed, you could situate yourself if you're not worried about the paint on the wall, so that you can put your feet up along the wall. Right, but it could be a chair, just some way to elevate the feet. You get nice and comfortable with pillows behind your head, right? So maybe that's a way that makes it a little different than being in your bed if you don't want to take me up on the offer to do all of this in bed. Or maybe you're just sitting in a chair, that's fine too. So you could just take a few moments to rest and integrate this little bit of work that we've done for ourselves. And I will do a very short guided meditation, so feel free to close your eyes if you'd like. So as we were practicing, again, starting at the feet, whatever condition you found your right foot to be in today, right? Maybe think of each and every one of those toes along that right foot. And if there's a difference between the right and the left foot, maybe there's a little trade that's going to happen. Maybe that foot that felt a little cramped in the shoe today, or that sock wasn't quite right, can swap that story with the other foot. And you could move up through the body this way if you'd like to. Again, treating yourself as a full integrated being. I have worked with folks, just as an example, who are amputees but have this idea of that other foot giving them messages from time to time. So if I say something that doesn't speak directly to your experience, just know there are all kinds of experiences in the world. So as you move up through the right leg towards the knee and the left foot all the way up to the left knee, just checking in, thanking every little cell of your body for doing its job today. And maybe that right leg and left leg want to swap stories. And then as you move up through the body, through the legs, all the way up through the hips, maybe you remember those windshield wipers and had a cranky hip or a hip that felt nice and fluid, or maybe there was no difference between the hips. Just acknowledging the hips today. And then along the back body, right up along the ribs, and through the diaphragm region where we were breathing, through the rib cage. If there was any tension there, just acknowledging that. Say, okay, it's the way it was today. And if you move up through the body and encounter a surgical site, or maybe some news that hasn't been your favorite news recently, or maybe you're along the healing journey a little further than other people, just acknowledge that your experience and our collective experience here is a part of why we're chatting. And so you could trade stories within yourself as you make friends in this community, swapping stories with other folks? Right? Is there a right side, a left side difference? Is there a major difference from the past to the present to the future as you scan and move up through the shoulders? And let's not forget the hands. So traveling down just a little bit, if the hands are in the lap, maybe you have the hands on the belly or alongside the body, traveling from your right hand through your wrist, along that right arm, all the way back up to the shoulders. And the left arm, if you have that ability, that left side is there to honor the hand, and all the way up through the forearm, the elbow, all the way back up to the shoulder. So then when you're ready, traveling up from the back body through the shoulders and the front of the body up through the neck. Maybe you were doing that lion's breath and you remember making a sound. So acknowledging the throat, thanking it for the work that it did today if you were chatting a bit. And moving up through the face, through the places that maybe feel a little different from massage, through the bee buzzing breath, from the back of the neck and the back of the head, all the way to the crown of the head, the top of the head. So the whole body, complete and whole as you are right now. From the toes, maybe on the floor, the back body on the floor, the front of the body, maybe you feel air touching skin. And hopefully remember to breathe. Maybe you'd like to pull in a giant belly full of air. That was comfortable to do. And let out a nice slow breath. So I want to allow a few moments of rest. I haven't gone anywhere. There's nothing wrong with your technology. Just continuing to breathe. Allowing your whole body to integrate. Integrate and rest. And you don't have to do any more if you'd rather simply rest. You can stay just as you are. You don't have to come back to a comfortable seat. You certainly don't have to rush. You could, if you did take me up on my offer to get more comfortable, wiggle fingers and toes, bringing motion back into the body. If you've eaten recently and if it's comfortable, I would recommend rolling to the left, but maybe that's not indicated for you as a good idea. So you don't have to, but you could roll to your left and rest if you're wanting to make your way back to a comfortable seat. You certainly don't have to. You could luxuriate for as long as you'd like through the rest of my words if you would rather. I do have a few more things to offer. You don't have to rush to get up and see them. We'll start sharing my screen. So this is what we've gone through the joint freeing series. Just to recap: tense and release, little self-massage, and a short guided meditation through the body, focused on rest and integration. What I wanted to share next is a specific mantra, a mudra. So it is speaking to what we focused on at the start of things, the breath techniques. So if your one takeaway from today is a new appreciation of breathing isn't just breathing, perhaps you'd like to take note of this gesture, right? And if you see it visually and hold it once, you can even imagine it. Right, and so I'll describe it if you decided to stay as you were, as comfortable as you were. So it's the middle fingers, the backs of the fingers. Your hands are facing each other. Those fingernails dip in to touch, and the rest of the fingers are lifted up towards the ceiling if you're seated. And you can hold it just gently above the body if you wanted to hold your hands in this particular mudra. It's the gesture of expanded breath. And the phrase that goes along with this particular gesture, you could say it out loud if you're muted. If you're not muted, it's okay to say it out loud too. You could join me. This phrase that goes along with this gesture is this: attuned more deeply to my breathing, Life force vitalizes my entire being. So I'll say it a few more times. You could say it out loud with me or let it resonate in your mind. Say it quietly to yourself, silently to yourself. Attuned more deeply to my breathing. Life force vitalizes my entire being. Attuned more deeply to my breathing. Life force vitalizes my entire being. And this particular card, for those who are looking at the screen, is from Joseph LePage, who I quoted at the start of things. So just to honor him, give him credit for his work with this card deck and for teaching me mudras, about mudras. The last thing I invite you, if it's something that you don't feel comfortable with, and there's a beautiful article through the Chopra Center that encourages folks from all faiths to focus on the common theme of this idea of sound being a part of the creation of the universe. And if religion or spirituality is not a part of what makes you feel grounded in the world, just thinking about the sounds of nature, the Big Bang is also a part of this article. So what is the sound of Om? It's Ah, O, strung together to sound like Om. So you don't have to force the diaphragmatic breath. You don't have to make the breath, the inhale or the exhale, any particular way. It's less about singing, more about resonance. So your Om doesn't have to match mine, but if you'd like to Om, maybe it's the first time, but I don't assume, maybe many people have Om'd many, many times. If you'd like to join me, you could place your hands on your heart. Anjali Mudra, which I demonstrated as prayer hands, hands flat against each other, thumbs touching the heart, if that feels right. You don't have to hold any gesture. Maybe it's the gesture that I just taught that you would prefer to keep holding the hands that way. On an inhale, if you would like to Om. And at Kripalu, we do typically end our classes by saying both Jai Bhagwan and Namaste, which essentially is saying the light in me honors the light in you. So I did have just a couple of more slides. If folks want to just rest, that's a-okay. Please continue doing that. I did want to say thank you for having me before I forget to say that. And also truly read the quote by Swami Kripalu that I was alluding to earlier. The highest spiritual practice is self-observation without judgment. So how did you do with that? Did you cultivate an inner witness in our short time together? Did you remember to breathe as I was even teaching you to breathe, right? Or did you notice that there maybe was a tendency to hold your breath? Maybe there was a breath technique that you preferred. And if folks really did want to have other resources, I did find a few that I thought were quite lovely, right? And so there's also a progression, right? So there's a link here in my slides for post-breast surgery. Of course, you should work with your doctor above and beyond somebody that I found on the internet, but I did really appreciate this doctor's efforts. And then Live Well, which is a whole series with Hopkins, actually. Also has chair workouts, yoga workouts. They're for after breast cancer, so some of the practices might be a bit aggressive for folks, not sure. And then I mentioned lymphedema. There is a whole series. It's more exercise perhaps than yoga, but these are some resources that I really did appreciate. And you don't have to share my opinion, but also it can just be overwhelming to try to look for things on the internet. And of course, what your medical team says goes above and beyond these resources that I'm sharing. And then I did want to say, I think I mentioned that sort of the proper way, the traditional way to do Brahmari, the bee buzzing breath. Where I'm coming up with that statement is from the government of India's International Yoga Day. Every year they have International Yoga Day, and there's a common yoga protocol. So you can find tons of videos if you're wanting to honor the connection to India. Also, this idea that the International Yoga Day and the Common Yoga Protocol is an effort to get everyone to do yoga, right? Just a reminder that there is a difference between yoga and yoga therapy, and maybe the protocol is a little more gentle than maybe a vinyasa class. So if folks want an even more active class than the Common Yoga Protocol, by all means, your preference is your preference, and you should honor that. I did want to stop sharing my screen again, and I have not been monitoring if there's any chats or questions coming in, and maybe folks are just still quietly resting, and that is a-okay too. But I did want to allow for some time for some conversation if folks did want that.
I had a question. Can you talk a little bit, I think you did a wonderful job of talking about why someone might want to start with yoga therapy, but can you talk a little bit about, if that was the case, how would a patient find information about a yoga therapist?
Thank you for asking that. So those insignias that I showed at the start are a great way. You can go to the websites of the International Association of Yoga Therapists and look for folks in your region. There are listings. And you can also try to find who's got videos. We're living through these super interesting times, so not everyone's going to be seeing folks or doing telehealth. Maybe they've got some classes that are tailored. So that would be my recommendation, is really working with somebody who has those qualifications. And they're not the only qualifications, but they're, as far as I'm concerned, the way to make sure that you're working with people who know how to work with medical professionals.
Yeah, no, I think that's really helpful. Could you talk a little bit, I think that it's specifically important to say that this doesn't have to be done one-on-one, although some patients it may make sense to do one-on-one, but so can you talk about the different formats that a yoga therapist may see or work with patients?
Yeah, so I know that there are yoga therapists in medical settings, so they might be doing telehealth. That's not your question specifically. I know that folks have offered series, right? And so a group could gather in our current atmosphere, maybe that's happening via Zoom, to do a whole series where there's been a proper intake and all of the intricacies of each individual is being honored, but folks are kind of on a journey together. So you could find a 6-week course or a 10-week course. And so hopefully that answers your question a little more thoroughly. Yeah. I think everybody's trying to figure out how this works now. I was working in locations where it just hasn't been possible. We've tried to do Zoom, and it was kind of a residential situation, and to try to find enough computers and enough spaces, they were like, you know what, this just isn't fair for folks who can't have access. So we had to nix it, which is really heartbreaking. Again, maybe not your question, but yeah, it's a challenging time to figure out how this works.
Yeah, no, I think that's helpful. I feel like I could talk to you all night, but I do have a couple housekeeping things. But before I get to those, we do have a question about your buzzing bee story. Is it possible to give us the quick and dirty version of your buzzing bee story? I think in class.
Yeah. So I appreciate the story so much because I have a fondness for bees, but also the story is a Hindu story, and if I've got it right, and so check my sources, there was a demon and making life really miserable on earth for human beings, and so the goddess Brahmari stepped in, and she, to kind of battle this demon, had access to or control of or support of bees and hornets and the buzzing bees. And so the demon had this other realm going on. And so what the bees and hornets did was go and take the demon apart and bring them back to her bit by bit. And so I like this correlation of, like, is it a headache? Is it eye tension? Is it jaw? Like kind of soothing yourself with this messenger from this beautiful. I like the story, so hopefully I didn't do too much damage.
Yeah, lovely. Amy, this has been really wonderful. Real quick question before actually I'm going to share my screen for a second. Would it be possible to get a copy of some of your slides, some of the resources I think people wanted to write down?
Yes, and I will do my due diligence to find the source, and if I can't find the source, I will remove the image. But yeah, there's my family in them as well. But yeah, I can also kind of cut and paste the most relevant information. So however folks like that delivered, absolutely.
Well, the best slides I think sort of have that personal touch to it. So I appreciate you bringing that in tonight. Real quick, I just want to go over a couple real quick housekeeping things. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us this evening. I hope you got as much out of tonight as I did. Amy, you're wonderful, and it was really great to learn from you. A lot of really great tools I think people can use in any sort of aspects of your life, whether you're sitting in a waiting room going through treatment or just dealing with the stresses of everyday life. These tools are definitely applicable and easy to do and very user-friendly. So thank you for giving us those resources. Just wanted to real quick, for those of you watching at home, if you could take a minute and fill out our evaluation survey, the link you see here. I'll also be emailing it out later this evening. Again, that just helps us plan for what other topics you'd like to see, how we're doing, what we could do better, and how we can do things better in the future in terms of bringing you other additional content. And then lastly, I want to just remind you of a couple upcoming webinars that we have in the next few months. On November 9th, we're going to have Rosie Scheinberg talking about integrative medicine as a road to self-healing. Definitely not something you want to miss. Rosie is amazing. Her energy is emphatic. She just brings so much wisdom, and I highly recommend it if you could do it. Please note that that's at 3 p.m. Eastern time, so we're going to be switching up the times a little bit come this fall and winter. And then in December, we're going to be doing a webinar on Feldenkrais, which is looking at a different sort of integrative medicine modalities as a way to sort of match the Western and Eastern cultures. So as always, you can find these webinars and all of our other content at the link you see below. I'll also be sending that out as well. Again, Amy, I want to thank you again for a lovely evening. It was such a pleasure spending the time with you and sharing
Thank you.
some wonderful things. So with that, I'll go ahead and wrap up for tonight. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. Good night.
Yay, we got applause. Thank you.